Today on Upfront, looking to win again after a tough election cycle. How the mayor of Los Angeles is getting the call to help Wisconsin Democrats move forward. Speaking of moving, an Ohio native is taking up residence in Wisconsin to challenge one of the most powerful men in Washington. Meet the candidate who thinks he can unseat House Speaker Paul Ryan. And it's getting crowded. Two candidates are now looking to challenge a sitting justice on the state Supreme Court.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. Picking up the pieces, that's what state Democrats are hoping to do after a very tough 2016. Democrats held their annual convention in Middleton this weekend. Their goal to start winning elections again. They've got plenty of work ahead of them, with Donald Trump turning Wisconsin red last fall and Republicans in control of state government. The keynote speaker and the man charged with rousing the troops, the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti. Voters just reelected him to a second term with 81% of the vote. He is a Rhodes Scholar, a Navy Intelligence Reserve officer, and a rising star in the Democratic Party. A recent story in Politico, in fact, said his name is even being mentioned as a possible presidential candidate in 2020. Eric Garcetti joins me now on Up Front. Mayor, it's good to have you on the program.
Great to be with you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So what are the lessons learned for Democrats after 2016?
Well, I think after 2016, there's one clear lesson, that we can't just play defense. And we can't just say who we are. We need to say what we're going to do. And part of me being here in Wisconsin is sharing the success of what we're doing. Around America's cities, mayors are showing, as Democrats, what we can do to invest in infrastructure and transportation, get good-paying jobs, and to reduce the economic insecurity that even in these low unemployment times, everybody feels, from Wisconsin to California, from Florida all the way up to Maine. And that, I think, is the message. Don't be so obsessed with a Democratic agenda. Let's be more focused on an American agenda as Democrats.
One of the criticisms you've heard of the party is that it's sort of the party of identity politics. Is that a fair criticism?
No, I reject all those dichotomies that either you have to choose identity politics or, jobs for coal miners, or that you're either a Bernie or a Hillary person. All these kind of false dichotomies, I think, ignore what the reality is for the average American. They don't wake up saying, I'm African American or I'm white. They wake up thinking about the debt that they have. They wake up thinking about whether or not they'll have good schools. They wake up wondering if they're going to get 40 hours in the shifts that they have this week. And I think that's the focus. If we are inclusive of good jobs for everyone, we will be the party that always sticks up for the underdogs, make sure that we have our civil rights and civil liberties. But we'll focus on the main issue for folks, which is, I just don't know if the future economy holds a place in it for me.
We'll talk about that in just a moment, but I do want to ask you about the generational nature of politics. Your party is probably best known for, as I think we've said, some folks who are not kids. I mean, there's Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, for that matter. Does your party need a fresh generation of leadership?
Well, I do think you always need that. You talk to college kids that came out in this election, people that were part of the Bernie Sanders campaign. There's a disconnect, I think, from a lot of people where we have old playbooks that we keep repeating. And I think we have to show people we connect with them, with our hearts and our guts, not just our minds. Democrats are really good at telling you the 15-point solution to the problem that you bring up. But I'm a mayor. I go door to door and knock on doors, even when it's not election time, or talk to people at the diner, talk to people at the supermarket. And you get the feeling that most people don't trust folks who have been there for a long time. And so if you can't figure out a way to connect, whether it's a new generation, new ideas, or just having the feeling that we saw in November, I don't think Donald Trump, people thought, had a better heart or a head than Hillary Clinton, but he had the guts to get something done. We've got to connect with that frustration out there if we're going to win again.
You talk about that relationship as mayor, where you talk individually with people about their concerns and their needs. Is a big city mayor someone who could be president in this country, or is that a reach? In a nation that's very divided, could you actually see a big city mayor being elected president?
Well, no mayor's been president since Grover Cleveland. Right. I'm less obsessed about that than whether mayors can tell the story of getting things done. I think all the rules are off. No African American could be president till one was. No reality star could be president till one is. But for me, I'm more focused on what we accomplish. In November, the same night that we had the election, the presidential election, we had $230 billion of infrastructure programs passed around the country. The largest was in LA, which provides good middle-class jobs, not just for a few years, but for 40, 50 years. And you look at low unemployment here in Wisconsin, but the problem is the job growth is anemic and the wage growth is anemic. We have to figure out a way that we can tell people who used to be on the factory line, here's a good new career for you. And it requires leaders, I think, who are mayors often to step up and do that.
I've mentioned that there's been some speculation about your political future. There was a fairly lengthy piece in Politico talking about whether or not you might be interested. What is your level of interest? Is that something you would think about?
My interest is in the country right now, not my political career. As the White House withdraws from the climate accords, mayors are stepping into the void. 88 of us, I lead a group called Climate Mayors, that are going to adopt the Paris principles in our own cities, where we control transportation, where we control buildings and how much energy they emit, where we look at all the planning and the electricity generation in our areas. We aren't powerless is kind of my message. So I don't think it's beyond the reach, but I'm not thinking about 2020. I want to see races here in the Midwest turn the right way in the House. I want to flip a bunch of seats in California where I have 7 people who are in districts that voted majority for Hillary Clinton, but they all voted to abolish the Affordable Care Act. That seems to be un-Californian, un-American, and I think that work is much more urgent than who we're going to run for president.
Your city and a number of mayors around the country are sort of defying the federal government on the sanctuary issue. You're saying that, you know, we're not going to, in our city, we're not going to come down hard on people who are in the country illegally. Is that a tough issue for you, though? Because, you know, the argument is we're a nation of laws, people are here illegally. Give us your sense of why you've taken the stance you have.
Well, it's a very practical stance, and I think it's a myth. There's no sanctuary city in the United States of America where mayors say, please come in here if you're a criminal. If you're undocumented, bonus points, we'll protect you. We go after dangerous criminals who are in my city who are undocumented. But the idea of our police having a separate role from federal immigration officials is critical. We have to have the trust of a diverse community. It is for the federal government's responsibility to enforce immigration laws. But I need to make sure that that person trusts a police officer and gives them a tip so we can get the bad guy. And I'm worried that the approach, which is a very political and ideological approach of the president, is casting a very small net in a giant sea without actually looking for the bad fish. So they're picking up grandmas who, you know, have a traffic infraction. They're picking up anybody and missing the dangerous folks who can cause us harm. My grandfather was a dreamer. He came from Mexico during the revolution, crossed the border as a 1-year-old when my great-grandfather was killed. He fought for this country, became a veteran, earned his citizenship, and now his grandson is mayor of the biggest city in the biggest state in this union. That is what America is about.
The mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much for being with us.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And our partners at WizPolitics.com did a straw poll at this weekend's state Democratic convention to see who the party thinks should lead them into the future. Go to their website, WizPolitics.com. A sitting justice on the state Supreme Court may soon be facing not one, but 2 challengers when we come back inside into the suddenly crowded race. And taking on Paul Ryan, the out-of-state candidate, moving here to try to unseat the Speaker of the House. We'll meet him coming up on Up Front.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company.